Ooh, I already got somebody on here. The House of Moth is one of Eric's Edge's um, friends from his stream. Yeah, Eric, friend of mine from the Renaissance Festival. Says I'll
Oh,
be listening and watching while I clean my office. Have a good first episode. Well, thank you very much, House of Moth. I appreciate that. All
that's
right.
nice.
Yeah. Uh, my name is Theron. Thank you, and welcome to Bricks and Flicks. We're going to be discussing Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, while I build the Luke Skywalker's X-Wing fighter, set number 75301. Eric pays me to show up, he says. Okay, the guest today, I have Magik13 straight above me here, and my dad over here on the left, going by Dizzy. So, um, well, first and foremost, we got pretty much three generations of viewers that have watched Star Wars. Um, my dad was in his 30s, and I was 5. So he took my brothers to go see it before I was able to go see it. And then Etienne hadn't been born yet. So Etienne, you said that your first experience was in the 90s when it came back out in 96, 97.
Yeah, well, if we're talking in the theaters, that was the first time I saw it. Yeah, the re-release of all the original right before leading to episode 1. So they did a re-release, I think, every year. So starting in 96, 97, 98, and then a release episode 1 in 99.
And you said you
So,
hadn't ever seen it before then on video or
no, no,
anything like that?
yeah, I saw it on home
Oh,
video
okay.
quite a bit.
All right. All right.
So, yes. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Uh,
Actually, first and foremost, New Hope. And maybe we'll start with my dad, see what happens. So he's at the tail end of the silent generation. Um,
silent animation.
and I'm Gen X.
Don't tell anybody.
DZ is not very silent, in my opinion. And that's a compliment, not a insult, by the way.
Father, what was your experience with sci-fi in general before going to see this movie?
Well, I was in a generation that still remembered Flash Gordon as a black and white serial where Buster Crabbe was the guy, and most of the movies came on as serials. So I was used to seeing Flash Gordon as a kid. Back when there were only a handful of TV stations in Michigan, I had been tuning the TV set to try and get the newest Lansing, Michigan presentation, and I was getting something when this isn't a day when you could still tune your TV set. I was detuned way to the right side, and I was getting this picture. I couldn't imagine what it was. And it said that it was um, essentially Lansing, but it was Texas. And they were showing
In Texas.
the Buster Crabbe Flash Gordon, and I could get it, and I could watch it to the end, and then I guess it was even Midland, Texas, what it was, Lansing. And I said, well, I didn't know Midland had a TV set, but now I knew that they had one coming out of Texas. Anyway, those days, you knew the right guys were white and the bad guys were black. They always wore that. It's like the old cowboy movies. You knew who the bad guys were.
Mm.
From there, it was outdoor movie theaters. Well, in those days, you could go to an outdoor movie theater. When they dimmed all the lights, you were stumbling around looking for the car again with a handful of drink and whatever. So here we were watching some of these B-movie science fiction movies. They were very simple. In those days, it was Earth versus them. Whoever it was, they were always coming in looking for Earth to attack Earth. And we always knew who the bad guys were. They were from out there.
That was like Flash Gordon, right? You were speaking
Well,
to.
it went to other things, the invaders from Mars, and the whole of the genre in those days. Them, for instance, um, it came from outer space. All
Oh
of
yeah,
the science fiction. The point I'm trying to say here is that science fiction was us against somebody out there. We never figured that there was anything else out there than bad guys. Um, Star Trek came along, and you found out that not everybody wore black or white. Matter of fact, some of your enemies you couldn't even see. And we went out there to encounter them. So the difference in the picturing is how these things put together came in when you come into the theater, the movie starts, and you get these guys in an altogether different place doing their thing in an altogether different world. You don't know who the good guys or bad guys are. The first scene, you see these guys in white, and it looks like they're bad guys. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if my kids will understand that. So the unsuspecting father, that's me, is obliged to view a new movie sensation designed to grab and steer my children's attention. And it wasn't taking place in our neighborhood. It's taking place out there. So it was a brand new wrinkle figuring out what's the ethics, what's the morals, who are the good guys for what reason, who are the bad guys for what reasons. It's a brand new world out there because it's not Earth anymore. And you have to figure out whether the guy that's creating this has a worthwhile system universe he's set up, or is it like ours or not? So that was part of the adventure the first couple of times we saw this, is to try and figure out whether my kids were going to be bent by what they saw or whether they were comprehending. And I was the one that was probably going to be bent because I'm trying to make conclusions that don't belong there. So that's where I came from. It was pretty simple. The complicated stuff like Star Wars became, like Asimov's robots, Asimov's robots, and then in the Foundation series were just too complicated to put into movies. So the easy stuff that you got was like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You knew they came from someplace else, but you didn't know where. So the complicated stuff with a long, complicated story to be told, well, this was a new thing because it found out that this guy didn't want to just tell one story. He was going forward with the whole idea, creating a brand new universe. And a bunch of tools they were using there were a lot different than what we were using here on Earth.
So an introduction to brand new technologies that that you weren't expecting, like well, like I guess elaborate. How's that?
Well, the opening scene, you see this little thingy racing across the empty space, and all of a sudden this humongous battle cruiser comes in this view and keeps on coming into view, keeps on coming into view. And it was a size when it seizes the little cruiser that Leo was on, sucks it up into this little hole in the middle of this big cruiser. You say, my, they always told me in science fiction that building a thing is only dependent on how big you want to make it. Because out there in a gravity-less place, you could put big sheets of steel together with one little man moving it around. Well, apparently, wherever this is, in outer space, they've already done this. The assumption is they've gone well beyond our imagination to put into practice some very large equipment that until we put a space station out there just wasn't anything comparable other than a rocket with a little bit of tongue on the end of it where you shoot the guy into space. This thing, you got a whole world of people living on these things. And who are they and how do they relate to each other?
So this was a really a new, interesting universe that you first saw, like, but very different than the science fiction novels that you've read or other films.
Yeah, it seemed like science fiction was written either from the guy's viewpoint of being a human being frightened by what he's run into, or the first guy doing something and what goes wrong in it. It wasn't like getting dumped into a whole universe that's existing and you got to figure out, oh, wow, this is a big place. What's going on here? Who's doing what to who and why?
So, a question: was the look of Star Wars something that stood out? Because what I've heard is that beforehand, I don't know if it's true. This one, okay, is previously all the movies before they had like shiny tech, like all the ships were glossy, but Star Wars, the world felt lived in, like stuff didn't work, technology was rusty, that sort of stuff. Was that something that caught your eye, or?
Well, being inside the ship first and seeing them shoot laser bolts or whatever back and forth at each other, and then hearing a clunk above, you get the feeling that this is a big thing that they're in. It looks clean, pretty sharp. The crazy little robots, they're acting almost human or too human. They're not acting under the 3 rules that Asimov had for his robotics. And it doesn't look like they're too worried about the guys who are getting shot at, where Asimov said the robot has a primary responsibility of making sure that the human is kept alive.
Mm.
You got into that dilemma in 2001, A Space Odyssey, when the computer knew a secret mission was being performed that the guys who were performing the mission weren't aware of. And therefore, he was trying to, by taking care of the mission, endangering the crew. That's something we hadn't considered as being a likely science fiction topic until, it came along and then other guys started seizing it. So Chesley Bonestell, Bonesteel, had a type of rocket, and you saw it in all the B movies. It would stand upright. It had at least 3 fins and rockets attached to the end of the 3 fins. It was sleek going up the side, and the nose became a point. Bonestell's rocket was the usual rocket picture that you could see in the process of the cover artwork. In the B movies, you saw the thing with some sparklers flying out of the rear end of it, and it was his model of the rocket. First thing that happened in Star Wars is this gigantic triangle comes out of nowhere, and it keeps on coming and coming and coming. So not only was it built as a triangle shape and shiny, but it was very, very big. Except for the rocket that put took the guys into outer space, we didn't have a large thing in our science fiction. Science reality gave us, it takes a rocket this size in order to get people to get outside our gravity. So yeah, it was interesting to wonder well, how long had they been there? What how long does it take to develop this kind of technology? We had
Well,
guys we had
the
the
I don't
guys
know,
we had the guys from the Germans, V1, V2, who were protected and became our rocket scientists, and we blew up a whole lot of stuff on the launching pad before we got anything that seemed to work right. I don't know if it was something that these guys in Star Wars had already gone through. You know, it's what do you think is going on? Where do you think you're coming from looking at this thing as it's going on already in front of you? It intimates that they're pretty technical, and you can be surprised by anything, including the robot who runs across in front of the fire with apparently no worry about getting hit. Then he worries about getting into the drone that they fired back down to the planet. It's just, wow.
oh,
How do
when you say fire, you mean when they were shooting at him, when they were firing at him?
they were when they got into the escape pod, and
Oh, yes, yeah.
he's scared about getting into this. I'm going to regret this. You know, this guy is. Where's he come from? If in fact the computers don't know anything we don't tell them, that we don't put into them, and we're worried about that special event that's going to happen when the computer starts to think for himself and decides who's the good guys and who's the bad guys, and all the technology that goes into making that. Here's these guys that are acting almost like scared human beings. And the one, C3PO is easy to understand. He's always making excuses, doesn't want to be caught as a bad guy for doing something wrong or whatever. And R2, he's a with it cat. He knows what's going on, and he's got something to do, and he didn't need to share it with C3PO in order to do it. Tell you how strange this whole process was. When we got my mother-in-law involved in watching the movie, she
Uh-oh.
couldn't make head nor tail out of C3P. What it? All I know is RD Tootie's talking to 3CPO, and what? Who you? So she was not impressed by the technical nomenclature, the names they had involved there, and this. In the middle of the opening scenes, you got all these white guys, white garmented guys, plastic like, shooting, and in comes this guy completely in black. Now that messes your mind if you're willing to believe that the white guys are the good guys and the black guys are the bad guys, because all the guys that are shooting there in white are being commanded by a guy in black. What is the ethical story being told here?
Right. Well, my experience was a little different. I grew up watching Star Trek, obvious reasons, and so really it went from a militaristic situation where you had a structure. Hey there, Cameron. Looks like one of my friend a friend since college. He actually said it influenced his early role playing game campaigns. Star Wars did. He said he was 12 when he came out, and it was the best thing he'd seen up to that point. Excuse me. I'd say, yeah. What caught my mind, what caught my attention was instead of the structure of Star Trek, what you ended up having was just straight out adventure with, instead of being on the side of the good guys, excuse me, instead of being on the side of the good guys, um, the military was no longer, the backing, no longer had the, gave the backing to the good guys, so they were suddenly against the establishment, um, and I kind of enjoyed just the romance of it all. I guess, I mean, as much as you can say a 5-year-old would enjoy romance, what it really came down to was the adventure and the swashbuckling uh, energy of it all. So that's where I came in, and once you came back from the theaters and said, "Oh yeah, 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 let's take Theron and see what we can do." That was actually the first movie I stayed awake through. Um, every other movie just, put me to sleep. So I was quite impressed, and from that time on, Star Wars toys were in my future, and yeah, it shaped my life too. Just like my friend Carmen here, it's it 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 was quite a life changing movie. It's still been, um, I'd say my favorite. It's my favorite of the Star Wars movies. Um, and a lot of people are like, well, what about Empire? What about Empire? It's like, well, Empire's a good story. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with Empire, but the emotion that I still have watching this movie reminds me of when I was young, and it's a life changing event. Something you can't just um, critically say, well, yeah, Star Wars has its problems and all this other stuff. Well, that may be true, but it's the energy and the emotion that you feel watching it every single time that has not gone away in 40 years, 45 years now. It's amazing. And once Lego came out with their Star Wars line, of course, I was hooked on that too. So um, that's how it affected my life. And I'd say, between role playing games and books and movies and some of the TV shows, and Lego, I mean, it's definitely had quite an impact. Um, Magic 13, ATN. Um, now you grew up in Ontario, you said, so you didn't end up seeing it. I know you have a French Canadian background, but you didn't see it in French to begin with. You saw it in English.
As far as I remember, but I could be wrong on that. We were in in Ontario at the time. Originally, I was born in Quebec, so I had the French speaking and everything, and we moved there. I think when I was 2 or 3 or something. So in 1982, I was 4, and I think that's when Return of the Jedi got released, right? I remember I was telling you that I remember all the marketing from that, like all the toys and stuff. Toys was on TV,
I
those
think
type of things.
82 might have been when the marketing might have started. I think didn't it come out in 83, I think, because
Oh yeah, maybe you're right. It's 83. Is when the video released, so it's probably
yeah,
83. So that sounds better. So that means I was like 5 at the time
perfect
when I
age,
was.
man.
Yeah. So I was just getting into Transformers and those kind of toys and those type of things, and you see the Star Wars toys, and that's what kind of got me into it. And I just remember just loving the toys. But what I remember most is there was on a pay channel in Canada, like an HBO kind of thing, and they had Empire playing, but they had the making of all the time because I wanted to watch Empire, but then sometimes they had the making of because it had the same title. I didn't know. So, but I ended up watching the documentary of how they made it, and I thought that part blew my mind. With like seeing the Muppet, the models that they make, for the visuals for that, and how they just took individual pictures to make it look really cool, which they essentially pioneered in the original Star Wars. They used a computer for that. So that's how they created that amazing opening with the Star Destroyer. Um, so yeah, it's been. I wouldn't call it a life changing event like you do, but boy, do I love it! I just unabashedly love it. There's, the first film is great. All the other sequels as well. I wouldn't say one is better than the other. They all kind of work as a whole. But I don't know. Sure, they have their problems, but I love them so much. They're great.
All right. Well, I guess we have our backgrounds on there.
Yeah.
Hey, Eric. So I got Eric's Edge on here now. So I guess the first question I had, where did my notes go? First question has been answered. So second one is, well, I guess my question would then be, was there a standout moment? Was there a standout moment for you? But looks like Eric saw A New Hope 14 times in the theater when it came out.
In what, 77?
Yeah, Eric.
Oh.
Eric apparently was pretty hardcore. That's pretty wild, Eric. Do we want to go through and say what what moment is stand out for you, or would you like to go through the movie and say it as the timing of the movie comes up and you say, well, that's the moment. We can do it any way you want. How do you want to do this?
I would pick the moments.
You want to pick the moments?
I mean, that stand out. And going for the movie breath by, that's everything stands out. I think personally because of who you are. Like, I'm curious to know what Dizzy's moment is, because that says about him and mine and yours. So,
Okay.
So that's my.
That was my next question. Then was what standout moment or moments in the really really struck you as something new, different, or whatever.
For me personally, or Dizzy first?
Well, we'll go Dizzy first. You were interested in hearing from Dizzy first, so what do you say,
Yeah.
Dad?
Well, I think the big moment for me was when they started mentioning the Force, and you got this smuggler who doesn't think much of it, thinking that it's an old religion. I said, "What is this?" Ben Kenobi, now Obi-Wan Kenobi, who was a devotee of this old religion. How do they define this, and how does that fit in the story? And Obi-Wan said something like, the Force, it's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together. I said, okay. There's an interesting picture of being in a major contributor to the storyline, influenced by it, and apparently the way he talks about the Jedi, they were a very large number of people who kept the peace by observing and using the Force and what it had to contribute. That to me would open up, how does religion fit into this story, and when Han says, "Yeah, I don't dig that kind of stuff. A good old blaster is what turns me on." He's more straight to the point. So there has to be some conflict involved in what is the Force and how does it work into the story. And then you get this big black covered guy grabbing a guy by the use of the Force. And he's struggling to breathe, and he was cocky a minute before. So the Force has some things going on that are definitely unusual. It's a lot more reactive than, say, sitting down and saying your prayers at night. It's a force that's moving in good and bad in the middle of the film. The whole story kind of revolves around and aims toward, in the whole saga, how the correction of the bad things is expected to be part of what the force brings about, as opposed to the dark side. What is the dark side of the force? Well, you get to see some of that as the picture develops, and you understand that for some reason or other, the guy that killed Luke's father was once a student of Obi-Wan, who was a devotee of the Force, a Jedi, but he went awry somehow and went to the dark side. Good grief. This is a little more complicated than I thought. So when they started talking about, use the Force, Luke, put this helmet on, the blast shields on, reach out with your feelings. Oh, now we're getting a hint of how to get into the using the Force and how the Force reacts to us. Feelings is an interesting thing because you can get people completely discombobulated, caught up in their feelings. So you can feel that there might be something wrong if, in fact, you had to rely on your feelings as to how to deal with the Force. So to me, finding the Force is there was a pivotal part of how is Lucas going to continue this story without getting bollocksed up himself.
Was there no concept like that, like space magic, that happened in films before? For that, I mean, now to me it seems kind of common, but um, I'm trying to think of films before that. There's stuff
You
like that
mean
in Flash.
you mean other than basic human religions being added to whatever stories or the like? Is that what you're asking?
Well, like Dune, which is I believe predates Star Wars. That novel had the Bene Gesserit that had the was it mind control, right, or something like that. They have the voice, so which is kind of similar. Happens in Star Wars. So that concept with religion, no less, didn't seem too foreign. I mean, for me, because I mean, I experienced Dune after Star Wars, but I was like, oh, that's like the Force. But I mean, I know one predated the other.
Well, you could probably get my wife more involved in the conversation about Dune. That happened to be one of her favorite things.
Oh, okay.
I got into it mainly because she was interested in it, and I only read that one. I didn't go into the rest of the Dune novels. The the one that I would say was a stepping stone was 2001, where for some reason or other, when they landed on the moon, they got this magnetic anomaly that shouldn't have been there. And when they dug it up, they find this gigantic monolith. And what's the purpose of the monolith? Well, we already had a precursor of that in the opening scenes where you saw a prehistoric man coming up to this thing and saying, what the hell is this? And tapping on the side of it and backing off, touching it again and backing off, not knowing what it was doing. But the next thing we see this guy throwing a bone up in the air and he's using it as a club, influenced by this monolith on the prehistoric man. You know that something in that is it's a story in itself. So when you get to the moon and you see this monolith down in a big hole in the moon, the guy that's sent there, the scientist, is supposed to figure out what it's all about. We now have to go back into deep space, going back into Jupiter and so on. And it's visually, it was actually more effective than the book was. I had 3 or 4 people wanted me to lead a book study on 2001: A Space Odyssey. Turned out they weren't really as interested in what the story had to say as they were in the fact that they liked to get together and talk, because they weren't really into 2001. And some of the stuff that I'd gotten to know pretty well about that whole thing. Um, this is where the birth of a star child came from. Well, that's still something out there, being a confrontation for us here to deal with. Star Wars is out there, and you're being carried into out there to observe what's going on. You're no longer tied to your earthly baseline in order to see what this guy has in mind in his story about Star Wars. So there were groundbreaking, I guess, angles that he put into this thing, which in some cases got him in a little bit of trouble. I was not much of a scientist in my job at General Electric, eventually Lockheed Martin, to the point where I could do all the formulas and the calculations and so on that the engineers sitting next to me did. I was in the financial end of it. But the first thing that popped up in my mind was Han Solo saying he could make the Kessel run in under 12 parsecs.
That's a good reference.
Actually, hold on to that. Hold on to that just 1 second, because all right, our chat is blown up quite a bit. Before we go into parsecs, we got Eric's Edge says, for me, seeing the scene where R2D2 and C3PO cross the passageway on the ambassador ship on the local evening news. He saw that, stood up in the living room, and exclaimed, "I have to go see this movie." And he'll always remember that moment. Jen saw my wife Jen saw the Return of the Jedi first. Then she saw New Hope, and then Empire. Let me see. As far as the Force, ATN, my friend Cameron mentioned that Dune is more not so much space magic as telepathy and psionics, which, as opposed to the magical features behind the Force, the whole all encompassing magical abilities. And then Eric also mentioned that the Force reminded him more of the Star Trek episode Where No Man Has Gone Before, where Gary Mitchell and Elizabeth Daner, is that how you pronounce it, developed godlike psychic powers.
Oh, yes. I remember that.
So there was some that was out there, but I think Dad, what you're talking about was the all-encompassing, where it is in every one of us from a molecular level, being in and around us, and I think that's what you were talking about, the being different from what we'd seen before. Is that correct?
Yeah, usually some force is external to us and affects us externally. And Obi-Wan's definition says it penetrates us, and it binds all the galaxy together. That's a pretty large entity to be explained in the course of the show.
Well, I kind of like that he doesn't explain it very, because, I mean, having the mystery in the first 3 movies, the just being, I guess, this sort of goes into the entirety of Star Wars in general. He doesn't tell you. He doesn't lead you by the nose and tell you what's going on. He throws you in the middle of it, and so little happens like this nowadays. writers don't know how to do that anymore. They insist on explaining when I think in this case it made everyone more interested and engaged in the story to not know, but to be interested.
Yeah.
So that was that was what I liked about um, where the Force went in the whole world in general, or the galaxy, that the world that we were brought into for Star Wars was. It looked like it. To ATN's point earlier, it looked like it'd been used, abused, and the world obviously that wasn't. Things didn't function well. There was just as much dark as there was um, good in the world. Actually, I'd say a lot more dark. It was, I guess, as far as Star Wars goes, it was a little more on the bleak side, and the only thing that was the shining light was um, the Force and Luke's sudden um, arrival in the stories. So
The New Hope.
yeah, the New Hope, yeah, a New Hope, yeah. Um, yeah, no, we're not going to get started on the midichlorians. That is definitely not part of this storyline. I was much happier not knowing anything about that. It probably could have been handled differently, but again, that's a different story altogether. And I have Lego sets that I'd be able to build while discussing that one. um,
Is it like little microbes you're going to build?
well, actually, Eric mentions it's a natural force like gravity, but with a personal element. So
Yeah.
that actually brings in an interesting point. Since everybody has their own gravitational pull that we don't know ourselves, but to be able to manipulate that gravitational pull inside ourselves is an interesting take on how the force binds us and holds the world together, and but that we can control and it controls us at the same time. That's a very interesting point you got there, Eric. Worst plot element ever. uh, Commenting on the midichlorians. Yes, definitely. All right, so let's get back to what was my memories for crap. So what was it we were getting into?
You were talking about our favorite moments, I believe. ZD.
Yes, and Dad just mentioned something.
Yeah. Yeah, and he was talking about the Force, I believe, and that's how we got into it. Like how cool that was.
Yeah, but then there was one more line that you just said, and I said, hold on to that thought. Anybody in the chat?
Yeah. Parsecs.
Parsecs.
Oh,
yeah, okay.
Parsec.
I read science fiction. I knew what a parsec was.
Well, let's have your take on parsecs, Dad.
Well, it doesn't take any genius to find out what a parsec is. It's a distance. It's not a timing device. You cover it by going that distance. You don't make a short trip of parsecs. A parsec is a parsec. It's like the speed of light. There are guys who think you can go beyond the speed of light. There are the guys that say no. Einstein says as you approach the speed of light, the direction that you're traveling, your length will diminish, and you become shorter and shorter in the direction you're traveling the closer you get to the speed of light. Yeah, I was sitting down just the other day with my pencil and paper trying to figure out how close would I go before I became my regular weight. I'm supposed to be an ideal weight. Maybe I can use parsecs to figure it out.
Right.
So, when you throw a definition out there that a guy can check, you may have trouble explaining that conveniently enough. So when that one dinged through, that one slowed me down and said, well, okay, let's start looking for things that might be a little bit flamboyant. But you didn't go from me to Etienne. He's just what was his?
Yeah, yeah. Let the finishing up the parsecs real quick. George Lucas had actually figured it into, and I don't know whether or not he. Obviously, he wasn't the one that completely wrote the story. He was the mind behind the thought, but we all know his wife had quite a lot of contribution to the story itself. But as far as his take on the parsec, and I don't know whether or not this was before or after, but he had mentioned that in the navigation of travel in hyperspace, the closer you could take your angling in distance, the faster you would be in traveling that distance. So if you came closer to a asteroid belt or closer to a planet than you rightly should, then your travel distance in parsecs would cut the corner better. So instead of going like this, you're actually cutting the corner closer than you probably should. And he mentioned something along those lines in the commentary. But like I said, I don't know whether that was something he came up with years later after being vilified by the fact that he's used parsecs as a measurement for that. I'm not sure,
Well,
but
you got this cocky smuggler scientist who knows how to figure out how to warp from one place to the next. Einstein was trying to figure out, is there a warp to space in the first place? And maybe beeping between one side of the warp and the other side of the warp sounds to me like you're going through nothing, gets you there quicker. So talking about distance becomes one of the calculations you have to deal with. Otherwise, you might have started out from Earth as a 20-year-old astronaut and gotten somewhere out near Pluto and realizing that you're going to be 100,000 years old before you reach the next star system. So distance and rate of travel and how you say how you warp that into something bigger than the Model T chugging down the road at 20 miles an hour. How do you work that into science fiction without making it science fantasy? Because the difference between science fiction and science fantasy is science fiction is close to what you can expect science to have evolved. Science fantasy is when you suddenly decide to break two or three laws that everybody knows and understands are laws of the universe because you want to make a story, not because you intend to be able to do that sometime, but because you want the story to go that way. So science fiction means tying it as much as you can to something technically correct or visible as a future possibility from what we already have. Depending on how far out you go in time in that other place, it may be more fantastic, more fantasy-like, but still should be based on not breaking laws that we've come to get used to. So it was talking about things and allowing a little bit of fantasy to come in where science was more than fiction then. It was somebody's idea of what some of these things could be, and they may or may not border on a scientific technique extrapolated to that point. That's
Does Star Wars stand for you in the science fantasy or science fiction genre?
I think
For you personally.
I think personally, I think they stayed pretty close to science fiction. If
Okay.
you went to Narnia or someplace like that, you might get involved in fantasy. You know, not everybody goes into a closet and ends up in a place where a lion talks. And you know, there are elements of science fiction don't take you through a closet without knowing that there's a back door in the back and it's possible to step into someplace else from there by some technique that's still scientifically.
Well, I would call that hyperspace. You go from one place to the other. Except it's a switch. So for me, that answer. I mean, not that anyone was asking really, but I always thought more as Star Wars is fantasy, science fantasy, sure, but I love Star Trek because that was closer to science, as you said, and to me, the fiction part of Star Wars is always the better part. Like because it was fiction, could bend the rules, and they had a lot more fun with those things. While in Star Trek they had to fix the engine and all that stuff, which I love Star Trek just as much as Star Wars. So they're just very different genres
Yeah,
to me.
I guess my generation was stunned by the second explosion at Bikini. They thought that maybe the thing could be twice as explosive as they intended, but they didn't know for sure. Guys are making calculations, and to them, blowing the second nuclear device at Bikini was not fantasy, it was fiction. The fantasy came in when the damn thing was 10 times more explosive than the one they fired previously and surprised the hell out of them. Now, we try and stay with a scientific principle and protect our butts from the outcome of miscalculating. Fantasy can lay in some stuff that doesn't have to have the person receiving the benefit of what's going on protecting his own assets from somebody else's stupidity. Fantasy allows you to play those kind of things. You say, well, that's just the way it is here. So to me, hyperspace was still a mathematic concept as opposed to more a science fiction reality. My definitions came from an earlier era, I guess, to say that hyperspace is not so much a fantasy idea or the ability to do that kind of thing as it is still imaginable. So that I guess that's the disconnect I would have between science fiction and science fantasy is if I couldn't believe they could make that assumption, then I would think it was fantasy. If I could still believe there was a way to get there from where we are, it was still a fiction.
Some of our chat brought up a few interesting points. So I remember this, Kerman, that this had been said before. Now that you mention it, one of the things that Lucas had said before, and I again had forgotten about this. Thanks, Kerman. That he also stated the parsecs line as Solo being a braggart and not really meaning that to be the hard science of space travel of what he'd done, rather than sort of bragging about, well, I did it like this. I did it in 12 parsecs, and that would mean the reason why Obi-Wan gave him that kind of a "what the hell are you talking about" look. I know a lot more about this than you do, boy.
Yeah, I saw the development then of having figured he was maybe a wet behind the ears. I saw the development during the process of his fighting off rebel fighters or whatever. Chewie do this, Chewie do that. Switch to forward instead of back. Those things were so automatic and understood that you start believing he said, I made a few of these, I made a few adjustments of my own. That he was maybe a little bit of a braggart, but okay. I don't understand why he made that comment. I've gone past that and said, okay, well, he is pretty inventive. He's pretty okay as a smuggler with technical talent. So I guess I was a little bit on the fence. I knew what parsecs meant, but I wasn't sure by the course of the film that he was as much a braggart that affected that comment as he might have been if he'd been doing silly things the rest of the time. Well, of course, there was the magnetic lock that he fired a blaster at, which was, you stupid, you trying to kill us all? You know, there were moments when he did something that really said, yeah, he isn't quite all there. So he may
He's
have
a
had,
hothead.
he may have skipped algebra in his high school training. You know, who knows?
Uh, that that will that particular scene will come up again later. Hopefully, if we have time. Something that I had noticed about that, but um, ATN, you were talking about space fantasy versus science fantasy versus science fiction. Um,
Yep.
Eric had mentioned that this is very much a space opera, like a
Yep.
involved more in the story and the characterizations than dealing with
Yep.
the hard science of it all. So yes,
Yeah, that's a better definition that I would use to describe Star Wars than space fantasy. So I was just trying to acknowledge the terms the ZD sorry, ZD. Dizzy was was acknowledged.
you just call him Dad too. All right, so ATN,
Yeah.
we've gone through and listened to some of Dad's hard takes on the movie itself. What about you? What are some moments that stand out for you?
Oh man, the opening so good. I know.
Wait,
Easy talked about it.
are you talking the crawl or are you talking the actual
Well,
spaceships?
I actually the first like 15 minutes, even when I watch it now, I just get chills and I get so excited. Like the story setting up, like oh, they're telling me a story, I'm in, and it's the middle of the story. So like what's going on? And then you see the small ship, which is one of the a special effect that was like oh that was pretty cool. But then you see the big one, still, and John Williams' score just elevates everything. Of
Oh,
course,
definitely.
best. Yeah, I mean, John Williams is just amazing. So, but yeah, that whole first scene with them capturing it and the fleet troopers firing and the stormtroopers with them and Darth Vader going through surveying the damage and interrogating like tear the ship apart and all that stuff.
I want them alive.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I think what caught me the most is like, we're following the story, but there's no immediately like a hero to, grasp onto. He's like, oh, maybe it's the princess, but no, she gets captured. Maybe it's the droids, because you follow them for so long in the movie until you meet Luke, and then becomes Luke's story. Which that was I don't know, a first in storytelling language for me, so that was really interesting. Because before Indiana Jones, for example, I don't think that was before, but I might have seen it before. But you follow Indiana Jones I think the whole time, except when he's a kid, I guess. But he's clearly the protagonist of the story. In Star Wars, you don't see Luke right away, so that was an interesting way to tell that story. Like he's really taking his time bringing in the world, and then you meet the protagonist. So it's like uh, I know the Lord of the Rings was written way before, but it's like the appendix was before the beginning of the book. Does that make sense? Is that a good analogy? So, like the appendix is typically the end of the book, but it's like the history or whatever. So I kind of felt like all this stuff happens, and then we pick up with our hero. So that was I don't know how he made that choice, but that was a really interesting choice. And of course, I'm going to skip to the end. All the X-wings fighting. Oh my gosh, love the X-wing fighting, the trench run, just everything, and like everything gets so close, and Han Solo comes in at the end, and he shoots it. He uses the Force, explosion. Everyone gets medal except Chewie. So great. Like the finale was so good. So just the way like the chatter, like you really felt the stakes, and the trench run was just so visually interesting, and you felt the tension. It was well edited, so you would you go back to Luke, and you get the noises, and like you hear the laser cannons when they don't they stop firing. You're like, oh crap, Darth Vader's there. So yeah, it's so good.
I was amazed when you talked about um, bring them back alive. We don't want to lose anybody. We want to get the information from them where those plans went. So we got Leia shooting the guy dead next to the guy that says, put it on stun. Essentially, it's okay. We'll capture her alive. I came from the generation that said the Marines are going ashore, and that guy right next to you is your best buddy, and he just got shot to death.
Yeah,
you're not thinking of taking that next person alive. So the reaction of how these guys carry on as stormtroopers.
To be fair, they have really good armor, so it's possible he just got shot and fell down, and because you don't see that he's dead,
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yep. Okay.
But you hope
that's a possibility. Yeah, I mean, I'm not. That doesn't change your perception of those events, and that's a good story. And thank you for your service. But I never saw it that way. But that's interesting. Interesting take. Leia's a murderer. I like it a little bit better, I think.
Yeah, she wasn't only throwing out nasty lines like your foul stench or something of that nature.
Yes.
There was a ticked off human being there, and we can relate to that, having been in similar circumstances. So now you're in their universe and assimilating, say, the kind of thing that you find people that you know and understand and others you can't comprehend. They're all part of that story, and you're immersed now in finding what you think of what's going on. It was a good technique to start where he did.
Yeah.
Because it gave him the ability, if nobody likes this idea at all, we haven't lost anything, because you get the idea at the end that, well, Darth is spinning off and he's not gone. But, where in the heck did all the rebels go after this? There's too many questions to ask in one movie. So you can see a universe of story available. And even let's look back for a moment and see this is one of the things that could come from that rather easily.
Darren, what's your favorite scene? I don't think I know.
It's hard for me to actually pull out a favorite scene. Yeah. I can say that there are lines that definitely hit me as cool. How about this? When Luke is drinking blue milk and having breakfast with or I guess it was dinner by that time with Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, and he's kind of upset because he can't go do what he wants to do. Can't go off.
Power converters from Tashi Station.
Yeah. And he goes off in a huff. Looks like I'm going nowhere. And Aunt Beru says, "You can't expect him just to stick around here forever. He's got too much of his father in him." Now, in Star Wars itself, that's interesting because his father that he knows was a soldier, adventurer. He didn't know at this time a Jedi Knight, but in fact he thought he was a spice freighter. What was that?
Yeah, he was a navigator on a space freighter.
Right. So he thought he was just out there, just having adventures out there. But I guess you're right. He didn't know he was a soldier quite yet. But just being out in the world and during the Clone Wars, he just wanted to be more. But obviously, Aunt Beru knew a whole lot more of than this movie actually even goes into, and in retrospect, probably um, more in depth than Aunt Beru would have even thought in this particular movie. But having too much of his father in him is always after seeing Empire and Return, always made me think, wow, damn, he could easily, just as easily as his father, turn to the dark side. Because you're right, there is a whole lot of his father in him: the anger, the you're not letting me do anything, and I can't go do what I want to do. The immaturity that his father even had, that Anakin had, it really came out as a whole lot more prophetic um, line than the throwaway line that Lucas probably intended it to be. But that always stuck out to me. It's something that uh, I got a question for you, ATN. Apparently,
Oh, bring it. Chat room.
may I know what the gentleman? This is House of Moth. May I know what the gentleman with the paintbrush is up to? He's curious. I
Oh,
believe you're painting Star Wars figures, aren't you?
gosh, I wish. I'm such a
Oh,
Star Wars nerd that I've been painting all my Star Wars figures. So I've been done for a while. So now I'm painting these little figures. But I'm painting, for those that are interested, Marvel Crisis Protocol. This is like the Hulk. So I'm painting some bystanders. So the Hulk here is going to be really hard, so I need full concentration for that. But these bystanders here are fine. So I got a park ranger here. I got a cheerleader. I got a nerd. So
nice.
I'm not sure how people are interested in this. So yeah. So that's what I'm doing. But Star Wars is actually painting. Star Wars is kind of Star Wars related. Is what got me into painting. Last year, I think around this time, May 4th, actually, I saw the Star Wars Legion. I had a lot of Star Wars board games already, but I never really got into miniatures. It was just a tough time, pandemic, so I thought I'll go ahead and do that. And I painted all the Rebel and the Empire stuff. It's really cool. I've been bugging Theron with like pictures all the time. So maybe not bugging, but
Not bugging me at all. All right,
but
so
yeah.
let's see. I guess I'll backtrack to stormtroopers in general. So during the first opening, as everybody has said, the opening scenes were really quite interesting to bring the story in. Stormtroopers in general, I thought were pretty cool. I liked their armor. I liked the evil militaristic. Um, I guess
Yeah.
they're not even the
Worked.
evil ones. They were just military. They just were doing what they were told. But just the fact that there was that much power, and the legions and legions of stormtroopers. I'm a big fan of stormtroopers. You can see right here above my head. I've got the Lego stormtrooper helmet. It's the only one of the helmets I bought. Um, was a big fan of stormtroopers. In fact, I have.
Work. Isn't the term stormtroopers the soldiers of Hitler? Like that's weren't they called stormtroopers? Is that the I wouldn't say origin, but they're called weren't they called stormtroopers?
Um,
I'm asking because I don't think I ever checked that.
I guess I don't want to come off as being an expert in any means on the word stormtrooper. Um, Dad,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Okay. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the chat room will check because someone will
Well,
Google it.
Yeah, is there anybody in the chat room that has any information also? Dad, go ahead.
I think I would hearken back to the Nazis, um, skiing troopers, the guys that, the guys who, like, where eagles dare, the guys who are out in the snow were wearing white. They were armed to the teeth, and they were expected to do their job in what was kind of a stressful environment because you could freeze to death out there. Well, in space, you could freeze to death too. And lack of oxygen, you could die real easy. So these guys were kind of given the same kind of a environment and expected to thrive and to perform in it. I don't know. I don't know the German involved in whether they had some German name for stormtrooper that became stormtrooper in English. I don't know.
Hmm. I thought I read that somewhere, but my degree's not in history, so it's hearsay for me. So.
I think one of my impressions with the stormtroopers was that it was a little bit like qualifying for the military or the police department or something or other. Leia says, "Aren't you kind of short for a stormtrooper?" Uh, I was amazed that she was the one that recognized he was short. Now, my question is, where did he get the outfit? It was the guys that went up into the Millennium Falcon that they zapped and took the outfits from. How did he adapt it without looking clunky for some reason or other, or too short or whatever? So there was a little bit of that left to your imagination. But I would expect.
Yeah, sorry. I am sorry. I did not mean to interrupt. I didn't take that line as a literal. It's just because he was cocking his head, and he seemed like he was young, like never saw a girl. So obviously he was younger, hence the short comment. But I never took it as a physically thing because him and Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford are. I think Harrison Ford's a little bit taller, but I mean not that much taller. But I mean, that's how I think it. It wasn't
when
a
they
physical thing.
when they entered the elevator with the Wookiee in cuffs, as they're standing there waiting for the elevator to arrive, you can see these two guys standing next to Chewbacca, who was 2.5 heads taller than both of them. And there is a definite difference between Solo's height and Luke's height, that there were some scenes they couldn't avoid having that show. So to me, I would think that was a piece of part of the story, that he wasn't expected to be the full grown guy. He's going to grow into who he is. And I kind of lost interest in whether or not he was growing any taller and getting more capable. That isn't a necessity as far as a human being is concerned. The fact that she called out the size just seemed to go along with that picture at the elevator. He was not as tall as Harrison Ford, and there was a difference to me.
I got some information from the chat. Let's see. Cameron says the name Stormtrooper comes from the real-life stormtroopers of the German military in the 20th century. A stormtrooper is a member of storm troops, also called shock troops.
Yeah.
Okay.
And let's see. Brankus Creations says, I think it did look clunky. That's why she commented. And Alex's Retro Shack, welcome. Welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for joining in the chat here. We're having a pretty good time, I hope. And I hope you guys are too. So back to another spot that I thought was rather interesting there. For me, when the Jawa's sand crawler was attacked, and Obi-Wan says that it's too accurate for sand people. I thought that was rather funny that eventually it turns out that everybody thinks that stormtroopers can't hit anything. But these blaster marks are too precise for sand people. But the part that I wanted to say was, even being 5 years old while seeing this, um, I'd say that there's a lot of people say you can't subject children to certain things, death and everything else. But um, when Luke goes back to the farm and finds Owen and Aunt Beru smoldering with meat left on their bones, uh, in the just left in the dirt, I thought that was pretty violent, a pretty interesting thing that you probably couldn't get away with nowadays. Um, all right, take care, Cameron. Um, let's see. You can't really get away with that nowadays because you'll have too many people saying, "No, no, you can't subject kids to that kind of visual." It didn't affect me in the way that I believe people think it would. I saw it as, my God, they killed his adoptive parents, and how would I feel if somebody had killed my parents? I'd probably want revenge too. And even at 5 years old, I was like, wow, yeah, I agree with Luke. I would want to go get off of the planet. There's nothing left for him there anyway, and I'd want to go with this, you know, old guy in some strange idealistic crusade as well. So that's that was one of my takes on that. That I
Well,
thought
we were
was
when I was raising you guys, I was not averse to letting you watch Roadrunner cartoons or Tom and Jerry, and they were pretty dang brutal. It was occasionally you kids would be in a fight with each other and haul off and whack each other, and you say, "Well, what would make him do that?"
he
Well, he
deserved
saw
it.
it. Tom and Jerry. That's a cartoon,
He deserved it. I mean, if
right?
we understood as we were growing up, it's like you do something stupid and you're gonna get whacked for it. I mean, it it's not like we were taking an overly violent stance on the the punishment that was needed to be dealt to each other. Um,
You didn't want to go out and get a Kalishnikov and take out a whole mall someplace. It was a there was relativity to the violence that you were seeing, and it didn't get you in trouble.
all right, well let's go back. Dad, I think you were mentioning. Um, I don't know if there was anything before this point. Actually, I think there was because you told me the other day you liked Han Solo. We had just gotten to the elevator just a second ago, and you mentioned how Han Solo is taller than Luke. So I guess let's head to the prison. Prisoner transfer from cell block 1138.
Yeah, THX.
Yeah. So, Dad, what was your? I know you were mentioning this to me the other day. What was your
I
your
think
take on the scene?
one of the silliest dang conversations came about after they got done shooting everybody in there, and some guy says, "Hey, is there something going on up there?" And he ends up blowing the hell out of the communication device. It's a stupid conversation or whatever. I thought, uh, for some reason or other, he either didn't understand that that possibility existed, that they could be listened into or interrogated from elsewhere, that there might be something other than the fact that they're trying to sneak in, and the mechanics of the situation got the best of him, and in its frustration, he blows the thing up. Uh, I'm not sure he made a good decision off the top of his head, but it was funny in that, he was frustrated not knowing what to do with that situation, knowing he had screwed up. So he blew the hell out of it. Okay, it's one way to get rid of the irritation. It won't get rid of the problem.
That's a pretty good take. Yeah, I mean I don't think I ever thought of it as being, damn, I kind of screwed up. Screw it, I'm just going to blow this thing up. I guess I just took it as his arrogance was, screw this conversation anyway, blah, and blow up the thing. But yeah, that's a good point. It's like, I kind of screwed up there. Oh hell, what the hell am I supposed to do now? Boom, let's take care of it.
Isn't it normal for everybody to have a radiation leak? You really don't want to come here and investigate?
You'd
We
think.
got it. We'll get it locked down. Holy cow! That's a lot more difficult a situation that he was in by his conversation. If in fact there was a possibility of an a radiation leak that he would have to anticipate the possibility of in that room. So, who do you believe? Do you believe his fabricated attempt to stop them from coming in there? Or do you believe that there is a possibility they could have had a radiation leak in that place? And probably fooling around with firearms is not a good idea in a place that could resolve itself that way. So Lucas opens a lot of doors, quickly opens and shuts without giving you deep concentration as to where do we go from here. You just blew by the possibility, and the guy out there is listening, that he might have come bustling in on a radiation leak, and it's a big one. But just give us a couple minutes to lock it down. Okay. I don't know what a couple of minutes to lock down a radiation leak would mean, but that seems like a pretty powerful statement to slow down the guy that's on the other end of the line from showing up too early for you. If that's a real possibility, Han was walking around in a situation where he could get himself in trouble just by being too cocky.
Mr. DZ, those are really, everything you've said so far is a really interesting take. I never would have thought of it that way. So it seems like a very literal take, I think. Like everything they say, you're taking very literally, which, is totally fair, but it's all very interesting and I enjoyed very much. I just wanted to say that.
Well, one of the things that my employers used to get away with was they say, you're a lot more capable and we got the power to pay you. And they tell you, you always find the right tool to do the job. Those kind of things probably steer me toward taking some of these things more literally or trying to extrapolate where could this go if this is true. But it's obvious by the whole series extrapolating itself over that many episodes that all was not intended to be understood as much as lived past as an incident. And, don't work too hard until you really get told by the author what it is he wants you to know. Don't involve yourself in describing the scene's possibilities. Let the author do it. So I may have reacted that kind of way to it. I just thought it was kind of silly that, he doesn't communicate too well over that device. And that was a possibility of an extreme problem. And that thought didn't work on the guy that he was talking to, apparently.
Jen just said, "That's why I love you, Dad."
Aww.
So the next part comes to let's see. Luke, I'm here to rescue you. I've got the droids. I brought Obi-Wan, and then they get out into the walkway and find out that their way's cut off. And Leia decides to shoot a hole in the wall to drop down into the garbage disposal, and they all jump down in. Now, how much time was it between, let's see, you had Leia jumps in, uh, Chewie gets kicked
Oh,
in, then
listen, Turtle.
Luke jumps in, then Han fires maybe once or twice more, goes across the hall, fires a couple more times, and then goes and jumps in head first. Once they get down there, once Han gets down there, since Han's the one we're following, tries to shoot after saying a word or two, then tries to shoot and magnetically sealed. The laser blast bounces all over the place. Luke screams at him, "Would you stop that? I've already tried it." When?
Yeah.
There was no possibility that Luke would have had the time between those few laser blasts that Han put out to the stormtroopers there, and Han dropping down in. When could he have had the time to get up, think maybe this is the best thing I should do is try shooting our way out, have it bounce around, and then Han drops in? I don't know. Didn't seem to me like that made. There's a whole lot of time in there. Anybody in the chat room have any thoughts on that? And Etienne, Dad, either of you have a thought as to how time warped enough for Luke to have time to try to shoot his way out?
Let's
Well,
let's not overlook the possibility he misstated the line. I already thought of that. Would have been more reasonable than I already tried it.
I could see that.
So I don't think he had time enough to do it. No, and I think there would have been more reaction. Stupid! You did the same thing we just did.
Right.
You know,
Leia would have gone off on him. That's what I'm thinking. So, all right. So, anybody have anything to say about the compactor, the garbage disposal, the garbage? Eric says it's the stress of the situation that.
Yeah, I love the gag where C3PO is like, they stop the trash compactor and they're like, woohoo! And he thinks that they're dying. He's like, oh, look at them, they're dying. Gets me every time. I don't know what it is about that gag. It's just, it's Anthony, the actor who plays, man, I should know.
Anthony Daniels.
Anthony Daniels. Yes, his performance, or there was like, oh my god, they're dying. It's your fault. Like, so great. It's just.
Does anybody else think that Luke was crushed? I mean, seriously, he's what kind of garbage is in here? They've got some metal, some foam, some probably plastics and stuff. But the angle you have of Luke in the foreground, underneath some stuff, at a very awkward angle, sort of reclining, and Han and Leia are trying to get on top of all the garbage. Yeah, Luke's legs are crushed. I can't see any other way around it.
I mean, I'm still trying to get over the fact that there's creatures living on the Death Star, in the trash compactor.
In the trash compactor, the Dianoga, is that what it was?
Where does he go in the track?
Yeah.
Where does he go? He may be very thin at times.
Well, luckily, he has some place to go when it decides to crush. All right, so they 3PO opens it up. Jen also loves the 3PO gag with the oh my god, they're dying.
Right, Jen. That's right, Jen. So good. It's the simple jokes that are the best.
3PO had a lot of strange sounds. We must be made to suffer. It's our lot in life. Really? A protocol droid.
Oh, I have a take on those. I think droids are like slaves in that universe. Like, they don't know any better. Like, they're all treated as slaves. That's why in like other movies they eventually take that thread. I mean, I understand they're just machines and all that stuff, but they're kind of treated in that universe as slaves and less than. So that's my take. I'm not sure if it's an accurate one, but that's how I imagined it.
Well, Luke acts to R2D2 rather nonchalantly when he's purchased instead of the other unit. It gives you the feeling that, yeah, these guys are nothing more than strange type of tool.
Well, but you see Luke kind of spending some time with him and talking with him and all that stuff, and takes care of some maintenance. And, I think he only gets like his voice elevates when he's like, "Whoa, who's a hot girl?" You know, bring back the hot girl. Which, you know, if I was 14 or 17 or whatever, I'd be like, bring back the hot girl as well.
Right. I mean, how many people does Luke actually have access to at
Yeah.
Tachi Station? Um, Biggs and Tank. So obviously Biggs is uh, not somebody he was interested in. If he was interested in Princess Leia, um, but yeah, how many females his age would he actually have access to? So yeah, I can see that falling in love with his sister or starting to lust after her might be interesting. All right, I've got a really complex piece here. And being in the dark and not really paying as much attention to this as I should. Take a look at this thing. I'll let you guys take a look at it too because you can't see it. So I got this piece here that look at how many intricate connections there was in this thing. And I got to try to fit this piece to it.
Oh, wow.
And I'm looking at the picture here, and I'm just like, maybe I'm more interested in the conversation that we have going on than, than really paying attention to what I'm doing. So I put it all together, and I'm like, all right, now I got a problem. I'm not quite sure where I'm at.
But here's
How
here's a
far?
wrinkle. Here's a wrinkle on 3PO. Thank the maker. This oil bath is going to feel so good. That gives you a position of authority and where he lives in the authority chain. Somebody made him. He could be reprogrammed. Uh, Uncle says, we have to. We'll take him back and have his memory erased and so on. So what were these things that were acting almost human-like at times, or obstinately human at times, ignorantly human at times? And then this guy says, the maker, he dumped me in this oil bath once in a while. This is going to be so good for my joints. Uh, the robots are rather complicated fixtures in the story. They said the opening scene when he ran across the aisleway with R2 and the shots are going by down the road toward the guys further up the aisle. So he didn't even blink. He just kind of ran across there. I said, oh, apparently he doesn't worry about being shot to death.
Right. House of Moth. Jen's my wife, so she's talking to my dad up there. All right, so yeah, the thank the maker, which is interesting considering his maker was actually Luke's dad. Um, Again, another point that Lucas had no intention of even, or had not no intention, but no idea he was going to get into eventually. But all right, so they get out of the trash compactor, and Leia, they're all getting out of or trying to dry off or whatever, and Leia ends up saying, "I think I don't know, Dad, were you and I talking about this the other day? Get this walking carpet out of my way."
Oh,
Yeah.
no, I don't remember her saying anything specific on that one.
Maybe I was just thinking it and hadn't brought that up because I know that I was trying to reserve some of my um,
A carpet that can rip your arm out of your socket if you don't let him win the game.
don't let them win. Yeah, yep. All right, so um, they're out of the trash compactor, and time to go from the, well, I guess he already went from the frying pan into the fire by dropping them from the prison into the trash compactor. And now from the trash compactor, we have them kind of going their separate ways as Han, as they turn the corner and stormtroopers are there, and Han decides to shoot one and then go chasing after them singly after what, 7 stormtroopers, something along those lines.
And you got to wonder what kind of mental state were the troopers in when one guy is chasing them like that.
Not only that, but what kind of mental state was Han in that he thought that would actually work by screaming and running at him? He wasn't actually firing all that much at him. So yeah, this psycho nut is chasing after us for some freaking reason, and we can't figure out why. So obviously, he runs into a ambush, and then comes running back around the corner, turning Chewbacca.
That was a bad idea.
All right. So, anybody have any moments coming up around this point in time that? Because from here we have not only Han's expression when he turns the corner, realizes he did something incredibly stupid, and
oh man, love that part. It's just I thought it was so funny and brash, and I loved Han Solo from that point. Like that's really dumb, but he's going through it anyways. And yeah, he's running down. Then when he's running away, it's really funny. And Han Solo and Chewbacca are like. I heard them compared to big kids in a review. Like they're what I would imagine myself to be. Like, always getting out of a scrap, but also like I'm going to do that. Oh, that was dumb. Go the other way, kind of thing.
Right. Oops, shouldn't have done that. Oh crap.
Yep.
One of the impressions in there was this little device that runs along the floor. There were silver ones and there were black ones.
Oh, the mouse droids.
We don't know for sure. Yeah, but we don't know for sure what their full intention is. But when Chewbacca looks at him and goes, "Arr!" the thing about wets his pants turns around and goes the other direction. So there are, levels of intelligence for each of the things that's in here, and emotional or non-emotional, however you want to view it, responses to these guys doing some of these things that are in fact kind of comic booky, and like his original intent was, this is supposed to be entertainment. It's supposed to be fun. You're not supposed to go all the answers. So some of these things are cute and get the point across that we're moving from one episode to the next here, and finding out more about the creatures that they're dealing with through Lucas's interpretation of what do I need to reveal about this universe in his time. Those little droids were kind of funny.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the mouse droid then would be if you're talking Asimov's protect
robotic law.
Yeah, the robotic law protect humans. But here we have actually mouse droid considering self-preservation above and beyond all else.
Yeah.
Like, oh crap! This thing just growled at me. I'm gonna get the hell out. Eric's
the walking carpet.
The walking carpet. Eric's Edge just mentioned a pop culture reference that Dad you won't get. I don't believe, but from a game called Warcraft, World of Warcraft that Jen and I used to, and ATN actually used to play too. There is a legendary happening that happened in I believe it was a 25-man raid that this happened actually quite often, where somebody would accidentally hit a button and rush into the boss fight ahead of time. But this particular idiot just screamed out Leroy Jenkins, and ran straight to the boss and wiped the whole party of 25. Actually, that might have been a 40-man raid. Actually, I think that was a 40-man raid. But either way, yeah, with Han Solo rushing after the
Yeah.
stormtroopers, Eric says, Leroy Jenkins. But that's definitely a pop culture reference that my father won't didn't get, but it needed a little explanation.
Yep.
All right. So this piece is getting quite quite intricate. I figured out what the problem was. There was a piece I had to duplicate and then drop that into place. So what you guys haven't seen yet, there you go. So for anybody in the chat or anybody watching, this camera here is available to these two to see, but they don't have my brick cam available to them. That's just for you guys on YouTube's. All right. So next, I guess the next scene is where they break off away from each other between Han and, I guess that was Han and Chewie already separating away from Luke and Leia. So then Luke and Leia go rushing around trying to find their way down to R2 and 3PO, who are sitting across the bay from the Millennium Falcon. And they run across some stormtroopers and start running away as well. And they run into a gap, a gigantic hole in the Death Star, which, of course, why not? It reminds me of Galaxy Quest. It's the chompers. Why are these even here? Why do you have to have walkways that actually need bridges to go across large chasms? What the hell is up with that? So here we go, and they close the door. There's no lock, and out of stupidity and desperation, Luke shoots the controls. So,
Oh, I think you can take that gap as a method. If you saw Forbidden Planet, you remember the problem with the people who had lived in the planet before. Once they went inside and got inside the planet, you could go, pictures eternally, a long ways down, a long ways over, and so on. The easy way to do that is not to have the bridge, cross the bridge, and automatically you don't know what the hell was below them. But in fact, if you don't have the bridge, you get an idea that, wow, that's a long ways down. There is something at stake trying to get across here. So it might not have been so much the design of the station that required that retractable bridge or whatever, as much as an imagination of the guy that says, you know how big this Death Star is?
that, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Lucas showing the immensity of the interior being just as large, because you have we still have Obi-Wan wandering around trying to turn off the tractor beam, and of course the controls are above another chasm.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
well, I guess another part of that would be excuse me, the whole episodic, Saturday episodic format is to give danger to each and every small part of the storyline, so that there's always some sort of conflict, always some sort of danger that has to be overcome. So
will they escape the stormtroopers? Are they able to bridge the gap? Are Leia and Skywalker gonna make it through? Tune in next week.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
I tuned in for years. Oh, did you lose a camera?
Lost one of my I lost my laptop camera, but we're back. Oh, I'm sorry, Jen. Jen's got to work in the morning, so she's taking off.
Okay.
Hi, dear.
Yeah, I got about 15 minutes myself, actually.
Yeah, it doesn't look like I'm going to finish the X-Wing unless Dad decides he wants to continue the conversation until I do, that's completely up to you, Dad. Yeah. Uh, Actually, in this case, Eric, you saying cliffhanger basically means that I could stop this and continue it at a later date as a cliffhanger as well. So, but yes,
That's
the
true.
cliffhanger is definitely where the stories are at, as far as trying to continue with danger, and then Lucas had mentioned that he wanted to have that feeling. Um, Good night, Jen. So,
Night, Jen.
all
So
right.
the process of the professor of archaeology going not liking snakes and going in the jungle and all that kind of stuff, he seems to like the idea of episodic uh, storytelling.
You mean
Oh, you mean George Lucas?
Lucas in general?
Yeah.
Well, he did say he was very much influenced by the episodic um, format, and I guess it worked well for him. Obviously, I mean, who would have thought that a $13 million, well, it was supposed to be under 10 million to make the film. He actually was put his budget in for just $1 under 10 million, just so that they'd allow him to make it. And then his budget ended up, although in some cases they say 11 million, he said his budget ended up being 13 million. Uh, so I would imagine that um, that being being influenced that way to make sure that his story got told the way that he wanted, um, worked out quite well for him, because then he went on to, like you mentioned, Dad, the Indiana Jones movies, again the same format with the serials. So I that format definitely worked well for Lucas. And
Well, the innovation of storyboarding really came to life in his generation, because diddling with a scene and asking the experts you got around you, can we can we pull this off the way I'm describing it? You invented a new technique of um, cinemascope that wasn't there back in the days of when the earth stood still and that kind of stuff. You got techniques of creating things that aren't there, that may cost you an arm and a leg to do, or it may be simple to do. But in storyboarding these different pieces of the puzzle, you can also find out what you may or may not be able to include because of the cost or the time.
well, isn't that where the innovation of all of this came from? Is you don't have um, it was even Peter Jackson in the Lord of the Rings that had mentioned it's really um, the lack of funds and technology that ends up causing the innovations to happen.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's
Yeah, and Lucas was kind of I think him and Francis Ford Coppola and I was doing Spielberg. They're all like kind of buddies. I know there's a bunch that I'm forgetting. They all kind of came through with like their new kind of idea of filmmaking. They all had their different ideas, but they collaborated a lot. So just Lucas was one of the more successful ones. I mean, obviously Spielberg was as well. I'm not sure if Spielberg was part of the original, but anyways, I obviously don't know my history. But as a filmmaker, he was just so. I don't think he's the best filmmaker, but compared to Francis Ford Coppola or even Spielberg, but he told the best stories. He grabbed the best element. He was laser focused on grabbing that pulp, like Indiana Jones did. Grab those pulp elements and made them just really good. I mean,
Yeah.
I like most of his movies that he's wrote or touched with George Lucas. You know, he's up there.
Yep. I agree.
Well, yeah, that's I mean, a lot of nobody will ever say Lucas is a good filmmaker as far as technique or I guess in his class of directors and producers, his where he shined was definitely the story and characterizations rather than the technical side of directing. He he was able to put a lot of things together, get a lot of things working by putting the right people in the jobs, like to to get done what needed to get done. So yeah, I agree. He's not in the same league as Francis Ford Coppola
Look,
or Kubrick.
can you imagine trying to create a thing like ILM out of somebody's pocket change?
Yeah, creating it because what it was, he had to create that from the budget that he got for the movies and still do the movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a good point that I mean, definitely an innovator.
Yeah, he just had a lot of good people. Like all the original designs by Christopher McQuarrie were just so great to just pull from. Obviously, the X-wing is in there, which you're making. Darth Vader. I'm sure you've seen the original design of Darth Vader with Luke. You know, with like a gas mask behind him. I think it was called Star Killer at the time. Luke's Star Killer. So that first like draft, I mean, all his stuff just looks cool. You just go uh, back and look at all his design paintings, the storyboard as you mentioned, looks so beautiful. Like they're just amazing pieces of art.
Well,
And
yeah, that's I've got them all right here actually.
oh,
Let's see if I can move this. Uh, all
oh,
the artwork in
there we go.
this, the script and the artwork, just it's a spectacular. The art of Star Wars that um, had the script and everything in there. So yeah, I completely agree. And Macquarie's um, the paintings just definitely gave you that sense of wonder. You're like, oh my god. Had I imagine that's how George showed people this is what we have in mind, and people are like, "Oh my god, I've got to be in this. I've got to do something with this movie. This is great."
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
just that feeling. I would have had that feeling. I imagine anybody in the chat probably would have too.
I would hope that what Shatner said about having to convince NBC that this stuff makes sense, we ought to put it on TV. The fact that they had to fight that fight they fought may have opened up a little bit the success of the coming back again after it had been shut off was enough to convince the guys who were in control that maybe we don't want to throw this stuff out just not willy-nilly. This guy probably's got a good story here, and we ought to be a little bit on his side. They started to make money on Star Trek. Maybe he says, "Well, this. Let's not be too hasty. Let's throw a little bit of help behind this guy. We think he's got something going. Who knows what human beings were doing back there in the background that made it tougher or easier for him to perform some of those things. But the amazing part is he did.
Yeah, he got it done. Which yeah, that's like I said, it's an amazing feat, and um, above all, Lucas should definitely be credited with just being, I'd say, the father of modern um, modern
Blockbuster.
movies, just because of Star Wars. Everybody
Yep.
changed the way that they made movies after this. Everybody wanted to have a piece of it, and realizing that you could do this much on a shoestring budget, just gave a whole lot of people who were on the edge of should I or shouldn't I ever attempt to get my stories told. Um, Definitely gave the inspiration to continue. I mean, anyway, that was my take on it.
Yep.
That's a good one. I got about a few minutes here before I got to go. Do you want to go for one last question, or?
Well, you mentioned that your favorite, one of your favorite scenes was the end, where all the X-wings all come together.
Yeah,
Did you see? You've seen the version? I take it. Yes, that's right. You did say that. Without the,
of course.
or
Special
with the,
edition.
yeah, without the special edition. So we
Yeah.
ended up having. I watched them together. I actually synced them so that I could watch them both together, and the scenes, although switched, the timing is still the same.
Yeah.
So even though you see all the X-wings coming across in the specialized edition coming across, and you see Yavin on the side, the
Yeah.
other version still had just as many X-wings, but it seemed
Yeah.
like it was different. It was the placing of the way that the camera was that made that scene different. So you mentioned this was one of your favorites that you still get brought up by just the fact that this is all happening. Do you, when you went from VHS, the original version, to seeing the specialized version, do you remember any difference in the way that you felt with this particular scene in general? Because I mean, this was one of the changes that were created.
Um,
So
no, not really. It was pretty much exactly the same. And honestly, at the time, and I think I still do, I really like the new special effects. Um, they don't really take anything away. I don't think. I mean, I know there's an argument made to not touch the original movie because it's perfect as is. But I mean, both experiences when I watched it at home video were essentially the same for me, so it didn't really take anything away. I was just, I wanted to see more of the X-wing, so essentially it was the same version, but I just got more of it. So it's like I remember seeing it in just the slow pan, but now I was able to see like a full 360 pan, and I could I can see the S foil in a little bit more detail. That was a little bit more fun. So that added a little bit more. Special effects work well with like machines and those type of things. When you go with people, that doesn't always work so good. There's still an uncanny valley even to this day, I think.
why you don't like Princess Leia or Grand Moff Tarkin or Luke in CGI?
Well, that's a discussion for another time.
Oh, I'm sure I'll find a Lego set to make for that discussion then.
Well,
Uh,
the,
but
spe- the special effect that bothered me was the fact that when the thing exploded, it blew a smoke ring.
Right,
I didn't think it was a smoke ring. I thought it was a plasma.
right.
Well, what all I'm saying is,
Yeah.
what explosive device is going to give you the ring effect that they had? Beautiful looking,
Yeah.
but in my mind, I said, "Huh, okay, that's cute." But what I'm used to the thing going 360 degrees,
Right.
bang,
It was exploding
everything
out.
everything goes outward, and
Yeah.
in space there shouldn't have been anything to inhibit that. So it was an interesting special effect.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was cool. I was like, "Oh, what's that ring? What does that mean? I don't know. It looks great." You know.
Yeah.
I mean, those initial movies, the first one is so good that you didn't need to change very much. You can enhance certain scenes, and sure, but I was just happy to see it in theaters. I, I think they re-released them in theaters like not too long ago, like 2010, something like that. I was able to see it again in theaters, and it was pretty great. Um, oh no, I'm sorry. I went and saw a live orchestra with Star Wars. That's what I saw.
Wow.
So
Oh,
they do that in Kalamazoo, so you can watch Star Wars films. They do that once in a while. And they have the live orchestra playing John Williams' score because it's so good. And you get to watch Star Wars, but they cut the score out and they play it all live, which is really cool. So I
Wow.
recommend that for
Yeah.
for anyone. So
That I'm sure was spectacular.
super fun. I hope they do it again. It's been a few years since we've done it. Obviously, COVID. So, all right, I'm gonna bid you, gentlemen, a good night.
Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks for the conversations, DZ. You're the man. You stay cool.
See you again.
All right,
All
later,
right.
guys.
Thanks, ATN.
Yeah, bye, buddy.
All right. So, got a lot of at least the fuselage, the as a fuselage, the actual cockpit portion all the way up to the engine. Just have to do the S foils, and so question I guess would be um, if anybody in the chat wants me to continue doing this, or if I should cut this off and do a part 2 later. Dad, I'm not sure how much more time you feel like putting into this. We've been at it for 2 hours, so
Well, part two sounds like a good idea.
okay, sounds all right. So, House of Moth just said, "Good night, Painter Man." Um, Eric just said we have a pretty good inaugural episode going on. Um, so anyway, I guess I'll leave it at that. I'm going to finish up this bag, which was bag number 2, and any more thoughts on the movie that you or any more insights, Dad, that you'd be interested in sharing with us?
Oh, one little thought came up because when I went out at your suggestion and looked up quotations, the one that popped up there was who's the more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him?
Yeah, I was hoping we'd get back to that one.
Well, sooner or later we got to talk about that because I had to question whether or not it had appeared in different places. Whether it was who I originally thought must have said that was Han Solo, but that's not who said it. I looked at it and it was Obi-Wan. I said, well, how did I get confused? I guess it's Han's attitude toward the old religion or something that gave me the feeling that might have been that thought might have belonged in his mouth. But to see it come out of Obi-Wan, that's kind of an interesting statement. I could go back and re-examine, find out what was his motivation for saying that. You notice that the people with him didn't run with Han when he went after the stormtroopers.
Right.
They're
There's
going
no
to
fool would follow that fool, but
Yeah.
Obi-Wan being a fool, they're still following Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
So yes, that's a good take on that. As to I hadn't thought about that. So you mentioning that nobody followed Han, the fool. That's a very interesting take. All right, Eric, you have a good night, and thank you, House of Moth, for showing up tonight, and actually thank you to Alex's Retro Shack, and who else we got in here? Who am I missing? Carmen, and somebody else showed up, I think. Oh, eyesight's not as good as it should be. Oh, I guess that must be it.
But it was a goodly crowd.
Carmen, Jen. Yeah, it was very cool. I appreciate everybody's input, and I appreciate everybody sticking around for the 2 hours. That's it was pretty cool. Dad, I really appreciate fact that you came on. Your insights on the film in general are pretty freaking awesome, as well as I enjoyed. I don't think you and I have ever talked really about Star Wars this in depth. I don't think we've ever had this kind of conversation before.
Yeah, this is an innovation.
Yeah, I think that I'm hoping that this particular format works out pretty well with me building a Lego set. I have, for anybody in the audience that is still around, I have 265 sets, and that is over 49,000 Lego pieces and 746 minifigures. So that was the most recent count. So I've got quite a lot of things to build and have as topics of conversation. So in that, Harry Potter and Pirates of the Caribbean and just about anything that you have out there. Plus, I'm really looking forward, Dad. Hopefully, you'll be wanting to join in on Sean Connery and Outland.
Ah,
So I was thinking if I made a space set, Outland would be an interesting movie. Love that movie. And
yep.
so anyway, that was hopefully in our future sometime.
Sounds
But
good.
any final thoughts then?
Not me.
All right. Well, to everybody out there, I appreciate your time. I appreciate um, the participation, and hopefully, I've gotten to everybody. I don't think I missed any of the chats, but I'm going to put these last couple pieces together and hopefully call it a day or a night. Got that down to the bottom. I got to put this piece on here. Stabilize the engine. And then, what does that piece come from? Looks like they gave me an extra couple of pieces here, which Dad you can't see. So I got an extra couple of pieces that. This is what I got so far, Dad.
Yep.
So now we just got to put the wings on, and our next time. House of Moth, thank you. Until the next one, yes. Thank you again for coming and participating. So, I guess, Dad, love you. Have a good night. And actually, I'd probably call you up because I want to make sure that Mom gets that. Somebody hacked one of our friends' Facebook accounts, and my mom clicked on it. So we gotta make sure that that's all cleared up. So anyway,
Life in the fast lane.
yes, yeah. All right. Well, thank you everyone, and I'll see you next one. I will put up another one as soon as I can figure out time, and appreciate everybody. Thank you so much, Theron from Bricks and Flicks and Dizzy Thinque, and what we had over here was Magik13, my friend ATN. So
that's from your viewpoint. Because where you pointed there last is where I am on your screen.
Oh, really? You switched over now?
It's over here. Yeah.
So I see you here. So all right.
Well, it's the same place, but remember, you're facing the picture that I'm facing. That puts me in the upper left.
Well, on your screen, on the screen that I'm broadcasting on, it shows up differently. So it's the way that the cameras show up.
Every time you posted, pointed your finger, you pointed to the other side of the screen.
ATN, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Yes. Sure enough. Good night.
Oh, one more thing. Eric's Edge is My friend that plays around with Macintosh, he was just recently building a battery for a MacBook that. So he has his streaming channel that if you want to watch someone play around with rebuilding and fixing Mac stuff, he goes around and
Hmm.
picks up a lot of stuff. So that's Eric's Edge. And I know House of Moth. I know you showed up in Eric's Edge. I'll have to take a look, see what you got going on. And I imagine then Alex's Retro Shack is also from Eric's stuff. So I appreciate you guys, and I'll be checking out your sites as well. So thank you so much, and we'll talk to you later.
Good night.
Good night.